Chapter 1296. Jing Yunjiao had spent the entire summer vacation outside, so when she returned home, the house was full of people. What surprised Jing Yunjiao was that even though it was already night time, Shintong and Xinhong had also come. When she saw Jing Yunjiao, Shintong seemed a little embarrassed, as if she didn't know what to do. It was a little strange. Jing Yunjiao looked at her for a while, then found an opportunity to ask softly, "Aunt Tong, is there something wrong?" Shintong's face turned red when she heard that. Su Yuantek couldn't help but laugh heartily. "Little Zhao, while you were away, your first uncle found you an aunt," Su Wenqing said from the side. Jing Yunjiao's heart skipped a beat, and she was pleasantly surprised. "Uncle, Aunt Tong, it's like this. We've been getting along well during this time. My identity is a little sensitive, so if I don't have a proper status and get photographed, it won't be good for your Aunt Tong. So I asked for her opinion and prepared to get married. Other than you, everyone in the family knows about it." Su Yuantek put an arm around Shan Tong's shoulder and said. Jing Yunjiao was stunned by her first uncle's speed, but at the same time, she was a little confused. Her first uncle clearly knew what she wanted to ask, but he only talked about the marriage. From what he said, it seemed that Shan Tong didn't know the truth. If that was the case, then her first uncle would be suspected of cheating her. Of course, she also believed that her first uncle was absolutely sincere to Shan Tong. Otherwise, with his temper, he wouldn't marry a woman he didn't like for an adult child. With Shan Shi as an example, her first uncle had to be more careful than anyone else. No matter what, this was a good thing, and it was worth celebrating. Congratulations, uncle and auntie. And cousin, we're a family in the future, Jing Yunjiao said with a smile. Shin Tong breathed a sigh of relief, her face slightly red. "Now that you mention it, I'm quite embarrassed. Yunjiao, you've helped me many times and you're my benefactor. Don't worry, I'll definitely treat you as my own daughter. If Honger bullies you, just tell me and I'll definitely teach him a lesson." Originally, she was a little worried. After all, although she and Jing Yunjiao had a good personal relationship, it was different from family affection. Moreover, her sister was a member of the Su family. If Jing Yunjiao felt uncomfortable in his heart, it was reasonable. After all, even she had made up her mind for a long time before agreeing to this marriage. She had raised her child alone for so many years and indeed wanted to find a partner. Su Yuantek gave her a sense of security. "Aunt, cousin Hong won't bully me, right?" Jing Yunjiao looked at Xinhong. "Of course, my cousin is the person I admire the most. I'm going to take the opportunity to follow her and learn from her." Xinhong also cooperated and laughed. "By the way, there's one more thing." Su Yuantek was very satisfied and continued. "I've also discussed it with Ah Tong. In the future, Shunhong will follow my surname and be called Su Hong. It can be considered as fulfilling one of my wishes and having a successor." The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Eldest uncle was really sinister. How could he cheat his son so easily? Suddenly, she felt some sympathy for Shan Tong. She had been kept in the dark all this time. When she found out the truth, would she collapse? Being stared at by Jing Yunjiao, Su Yuantek's expression became a little awkward. He had no choice but to do so. Shin Tong looked weak, but in fact, she was soft on the outside and had a strong temper. If she knew that Shin Hong was his son, she would definitely not agree to the marriage. She might even take her son and leave the country immediately. However, if they got married first, what's done cannot be undone. In the future, she would naturally know that he was sincerely good to her and not just for the child. Chapter 1297. Jing Yunjiao sighed. After all, this was a private matter between her uncle and Shan Tong. The dispute between the two had existed for more than 20 years. It was not appropriate for her to interfere, so it was better for her to stay on the sidelines. Moreover, she did hope that they could become a couple. Since they liked each other, those messy reasons should not be a stumbling block. "Zhao, what's going on with Qi Yugu's illness? Why was there a rumor that he had passed away? I happened to meet Elder Long in the military last time. I asked him out of kindness, but he actually told me to come back and ask you. It seems that he has some enmity towards you?" After talking about the private matter, Su Yuantek asked about the recent events. When Jing Yunjiao heard this, the corner of her mouth twitched violently. Elder Long was not the only one. Many people who used to be at the level of an overlord hated her to the core. However, it did not affect her much. No matter how much they disliked her, they could not kill her. Uncle, I have to apologize to you about this. Because of Elder Chi's request, Xiaoyun and I could not tell you the truth. Actually, Elder Chi deliberately set up a trap to see the reactions of the major military regions. Jing Yunjiao hurriedly restrained herself. When she said this, Su Yuantek understood. No wonder the news about Qi Yugua appeared so strangely. It's not your fault. Who dares to disobey Elder Chi's words? Not only did Su Yuantek not blame her, but she was also very energetic. Originally, I was worried that you would have a hard time if you made enemies everywhere. Now, it seems that Elder Chi also thinks highly of you. Those people are only cursing behind your back. Don't take it seriously. Also, Su Yuantek suddenly smiled. She looked at Elder Su and said, Dad, it seems that the Jing family is not far away from rising. Elder Su had just drunk a little wine after dinner, so his old face was still a little red. At this moment, he revealed a rare look of nostalgia. Little Zhao, you did well this time. I guess Jing Rong and the other clansmen have already received the news. You don't have to look for them personally. They will come to you themselves. Uncle, I still need your help to put pressure on the Li family's hospitals in private, Jing Yunjiao said politely. Ever since she acknowledged her family, she had been going against the Li family. Needless to say about the immortal Crane Hall, the most important thing was that the medicine she produced was not sold to the Li family's hospitals and pharmacies at all. Because of this, they suffered a lot of losses. Now, the stocks of the industry were already falling, and the situation was getting worse. This time, with her uncle's pressure and the help of the Jing Group 1, as well as the scattered shares she had bought previously, Li Wenba could completely give up his position. Thinking of this, Jing Yunjiao's eyes shone brightly. Ah Zhao, don't forget about me. I can also help a little, Li Xiaoyun suddenly said from the side. Huh. Jing Yunjiao was stunned. Zhong Ming was recommended by the Li family. The Li family must bear some responsibility. In addition, when I interrogated Zhong Ming, he splashed a lot of dirty water on the Li family. I also know a lot of the Li family's secrets. Any one of them can ruin Li Wenba's reputation, Li Xiaoyun said. In the past, he only helped her behind her back because he did not want her to feel too threatened and feel that he was too ambitious. However, now that the time had come, he should have the right to stand by her side and cut through all obstacles together. Li Xiaoyun's gaze had a hint of penetrating one's heart. Jing Yunjiao was a little shocked. After thinking about it, she smiled and nodded. Okay, little Zhao, your uncle and Li Xiaoyun can help, but I can too. I have a lot of connections. Li Wenba has used a lot of imported medicine these years. It's not good to touch the hospital in case it hurts the innocent, but his pharmacies can still be touched. Su Wenqing smiled confidently. He was not someone to be trifled with. Even the feathers on its body were becoming more and more gorgeous. The black and purple flowing light was like a cape under the night sky. It was very handsome. Nowadays, Haiti rarely went to school, but every time he went, he would attract a lot of people to watch. In particular, Hua Tianxian and Yao Baobao wanted nothing more than to parade Haiti around a few times. But it was no wonder. Under the temptation of Haiti, Yao Baobao also had a pet before. It was a small dog. After teaching the dog a few skills, she happily brought it to school. Who knew that after she returned to the dormitory, the little dog would not let go of her. Yao Baobao's maiden heart was completely shattered. From then on, she sent the dog back to its hometown and never brought it to school again. This also led to Haidi becoming the only treasure in their hands. Chapter 1299. Although Haidi could learn to speak, he rarely opened his mouth. At this moment, he was standing obediently in his little territory, motionless like a dark night. Jing Yunjiao and Li Xiaoyun chatted for a while, but as time passed, she still had to face what she had to face, so she braced herself and went to the bathroom. When she came out, there was still a trace of steam on her body, and her wet hair was dripping with water. She was covered with a towel and wrapped in a bathrobe. Li Xiaoyun's deep eyes made her hair stand. The room was brightly lit, and Jing Yunjiao's face was flushed, looking more beautiful than usual. Jing Yunjiao didn't know what to say, but Li Xiaoyun suddenly pulled the curtain at the side and covered Hades' body. "What are you doing?" Jing Yunzhao was stunned. "You can only be seen by me like this." Li Xiaoyun walked over and wrapped his arms around her body. The atmosphere was ambiguous. Jing Yunzhao's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It's just a bird." "Not even a bird, it's a male," Li Xiaoyun teased, then took the towel off her head, rubbed her wet hair, and wiped it for her. His hands were very big, but they were very warm. His movements were gentle and slow, and there was a calming smell on him. Her eyelids couldn't help but feel heavy. In the end, she simply sat on the edge of the bed and let him take care of her. Her heart also followed with a thump-thump-thump sound. This feeling was very tranquil, and she actually had the feeling that this life was enough. Although she had lived for more than 20 years in her previous life, there was no important man in her life. She even had a natural sense of defense and disgust towards men. Li Xiaoyun was the first person to come close to her, but he was different. "If you fall asleep, then I will be a failure." Li Xiaoyun gently scratched the tip of her nose, making her come back to her senses from her wild thoughts. Hades finally struggled out of the bed and seemed to have a little temper. He stayed in the corner gloomily, pretending to be pitiful, waiting for his master to pity him. "No." Jing Yunzhao wrapped his arms around her waist, one sitting and one standing. Jing Yunzhao rested her head on his waist, her face burning red. "Ah Zhao," Li Xiaoyun suddenly called out.
Yes.
"It's time to sleep. I'll go wash up first." "Wait for me," Li Xiaoyun said again. Jing Yunzhao nodded. Seeing her like this, Li Xiaoyun's stomach tightened. His eyes were burning. He looked down at her and said subconsciously, "Give it to me." Jing Yunzhao was stunned for a moment. Then, his face, which was like a burning cloud, was at a loss of what to do. He couldn't bear to refuse, but he was also a little worried and scared. There was resistance and conflict, and there was also some emotion on his face. It was extremely complex. After a while, Jing Yunzhao took a deep breath and nodded in agreement. Since it was going to happen sooner or later, there was nothing wrong with it now. Li Xiaoyun caressed her face, smiled, and went to the bathroom. The waiting time should have been extremely long, but it didn't seem long before Li Xiaoyun appeared in front of her. Her body was pushed onto the bed. His warm breath surrounded her ears, and her body felt cold. However, this pair of hands kept moving, making her feel dizzy. Her body didn't know how to react. However, the pain that she thought would come didn't come. Not long after, Li Xiaoyun stopped. She seemed to be able to feel the discomfort of his endurance. His bloodshot eyes were a little scary. After looking at her for a few seconds, he hugged her in his arms. "Okay, let's sleep. But you..." Jing Yunzhao's eyes were a little misty. "Don't you feel uncomfortable?" Chapter 1300. This was the first time in her life that Jing Yunzhao was so nervous. Li Xiaoyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He played with her hair and said, "I've waited for so many years. There's no reason why I can't wait for these last few days. After you're done with the Li family, I'll take you to see my parents. At that time, we can discuss our engagement. Is that okay?" Li Xiaoyun's gaze was probing. He treasured the woman in front of him very much. Although there was nothing wrong with having something happen between them now, deep in his bones, because he cherished her, because she was precious, he wanted to respect her. He was a man, and he wanted to save her first time for the best day, and not give it away so casually. Okay, this was the first time Jing Yunzhao felt like she wanted to cry. Even if he didn't say what he meant, she could feel his carefulness from his eyes. It was as if she was a glass doll that could break with a light touch. Jing Yunzhao raised her head. Her body moved a little, and she took the initiative to rub her lips against his. "Don't move. Otherwise, your body won't be able to take it." Li Xiaoyun smiled bitterly. Such a fragrant beauty in his arms, but he couldn't move or touch her. This feeling wasn't very good. "I have medicine. Do I use it?" Jing Yunzhao held back her laughter and asked. When Li Xiaoyun heard this, he immediately gritted his teeth and said, "No." Jing Yunzhao's body twitched and she laughed out loud. That night, they slept in each other's arms. In front of Li Xiaoyun, Jing Yunzhao was a heartless person. However, she didn't know that this night, a certain man took cold baths 3 or 4 times. It was painful but happy. The next day, the bright and beautiful sun was full of warmth. The Su family came to visit. More than one person came. Led by Jing Rong, the elder of the Jing family, many other family members came to visit. Other than Elders Su and Jing Yunjiao, the others didn't participate. The group of people discussed many things. That morning, the news had already spread that Jing Yunjiao cured Qi Yugua's chronic illness. It almost made the whole country boil. However, Jing Yunjiao didn't go out, so she didn't know about it. Of course, this news was spread by Su Yuantek with some additional information. He even made the grudge between the Li family and the Jing family public. Li Wenba, who used to be loved and respected by everyone, became a heartbreaker that everyone despised overnight. Some people insulted him for swallowing his wife's assets. Some said that he was hypocritical. There were even people who suspected that this old man had killed his lover when he was young to obtain his wealth. At this time, everyone in the Jing clan clearly knew what they should do. Jing Yunjiao was the only successor. They all had some assets that were managed on behalf of Jing Yunjiao. Now, it was all transferred to her in the form of shares. But at the same time, Jing Yunjiao also had to pay a price. They were all members of the Jing family, and what they wanted the most was medical skills. Therefore, Jing Yunjiao proposed that they set up an independent national healer academy in the future to teach the children and disciples of the Jing family. As for her, she would accept these children as her first-generation disciples. Jing Yunjiao was the #1 doctor in the eyes of others. She had cured Qi Yugua, so it wasn't shameful to be her disciple. Not to mention that everyone knew her true talent. The Jing family's medical skills had declined for too long, and it was time for them to rise again. On this day, Jing Yunjiao did a lot of things. She signed many documents, all of which were related to benefits. Every one of them was a straw that crushed Li Wenba. Chapter 1301. Because of the dispute between the Jing group and Li Wenba, the shares of the Li family's businesses were falling rapidly. Both sides were fighting for every second. However, Jing Yunjiao was more popular, so he got more and more shares. A few days later, Li Wenba was walking in the corridor of his own hospital. Looking at the bleak scene, he was angry and angry. In such a short time, the patients had all left the hospital. The supply of his pharmacy was blocked, and the hospital was deserted. Elderly, we've already tried our best to persuade her to stay, but our hospital already lacks the best medicines on the market, which has already made many patients unhappy. Now that Jing Yunjiao has cured Qi Yugua, that's Qi Yugua we're talking about. A director beside him chattered endlessly. Shut up. Li Wenba's beard was trembling. What about the previous new drug research projects? Li Shuqi asked. No patients are willing to cooperate, no matter how much money they give. Also, more than half of the participating doctors quit. Most of them have been poached by other hospitals. When Li Wenba heard this, he felt dizzy. He knew that once Jing Yunjiao came back, what awaited him would be an irreversible blow. However, he couldn't stop it. Elderly, the people from the board of directors are here. They want to elect a new. Someone ran over and didn't dare to finish the sentence. However, Li Wenba already knew. He didn't have a lot of shares in his hands. Now that Jing Yunjiao had the upper hand and had the support of manpower, it was expected that he would take the opportunity to replace him. However, it was really infuriating. He walked to the meeting room with heavy footsteps. The atmosphere in the room was depressing. Jing Yunjiao sat at the head of the table. He was in high spirits. Beside him was his son, Li Tianyi. No, it was Jing Tianyi now. In the past, he had never thought that he would be pushed down by this granddaughter of his. He had only thought that she was just a little girl, so he had ignored her at the beginning. Later on, he had come forward to look down on her and show her kindness. But it wasn't until that time when his subordinates had failed to assassinate her that he realized that this granddaughter of his was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Elderly, the directors have made a decision. From today onwards, you will step down from your position as the highest director of Mingi Group. But don't worry, you still hold the shares in your hands. If there are no accidents, you will still be eligible to receive dividends every year. Jing Yunjiao's voice was cold and indifferent as he directly stated a fact. However, the accident that she mentioned would definitely happen. Li Wenbo choked and felt extremely uncomfortable. The Jing Corporation was the predecessor of the Ming He Corporation, but the entire corporation was founded by Li Wenbo. In his eyes, even though he had used everything from the Jing family when he started his business, after so many years, the Jing Corporation and his hard work had already merged together. If not for Jing Yunjiao's sudden appearance, he would have forgotten how he had changed the name of the Jing family. Li Wenbo suddenly felt that his throat was a little hoarse. He stared at the girl in front of him and couldn't speak. Why did this child have the blood of Jing Wenyue and the Su family flowing in his body? If Lin Feng had given birth to Tianyi, if this child also had Lin Feng's blood flowing in his body, then he would be willing to hand everything over to her. After all, she would inherit the Li Corporation. No, she was just a girl. Sooner or later, she would have to marry outside. Fortunately, his eldest daughter was pregnant again and had already guaranteed that the child's surname would be Li. He still had shares in his hands and other private assets outside of the Ming He Corporation. Chapter 1302. Li Wenbo was a little stunned. Almost everyone present had never seen Li Wenbo like this before. In the past, this old man loved to establish his stern image, causing everyone on the board of directors to be wary of him. In their memories, they had never seen him so anxious before. This was the first time, but it had to be said that everyone present was in a good mood. As for those who stood on Li Wenbo's side previously, Jing Yunjiao had already privately thought of ways to kick them out of Mingyi Group. People with wild ambitions could not be left alive. Since you have taken over the company, then you have to take responsibility. I hope that the company can develop better. Now that the stock price has fallen, the first thing you have to deal with should be this, right? After a while, Li Wenbo suddenly spoke. Don't worry, I will be responsible for every shareholder. However, elderly, I still have some things to discuss with you in private. It's about the shares in your hands. Jing Yunjiao's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness as he spoke. You want all the shares in my hands? Dream on. There's nothing to discuss. Li Wenbo's tone suddenly turned cold. If Jing Yunjiao managed the company well, then he would still be one of the beneficiaries. His losses would not be too great. Is that so? Then why don't you take a look at this first before you consider? Jing Yunjiao smiled and took out one of the documents on the table. Everyone took a look and tacitly left. Li Wenbo was angry. After so many years, when had this group of people ever been so obedient and cooperative with him? Li Wenbo angrily took the document from Jing Yunjiao's hand and casually glanced at it. However, with one glance, his face instantly stiffened. Dad, are you okay? Beside him, Li Shuqi asked with concern. You leave first. Li Wenbo gritted his teeth. Li Shuqi's expression changed. She glanced at Jing Yunjiao unhappily, but she still listened to Li Wenbo's words. After thinking about it, she also left and closed the door. Only the old man and the young man were left in the room. Li Wenbo's face was a little ferocious. You want to send your own grandfather to prison? I wouldn't dare to do that. That's why I'm showing it to you first. Jing Yunjiao sneered and said, Dr. Zhongming said a lot of bad things about you. Now he has been executed by the military. Elderly, if you cooperate, I can give you this private document about you, as well as the video and audio recording in my hands. You can also find someone to verify it. It can be confirmed that it is the original version and there are no traces of it being copied. Of course, there's only one chance. If you don't cherish it, this thing will be handed over to the military. Even if you're innocent, not everything can be explained with just a mouth. In the past, you've set up a few drug research projects. One of them accidentally developed the bacteria-type drug. I heard that there were even people from the enemy country who secretly negotiated with you. Even though the drug's usability was proven to not be high, you were still tempted by it. If they really caught you, you wouldn't be treated unjustly, Jing Yunjiao added. Li Wenbo's eyelids twitched. That drug was a secret. As a businessman, he couldn't go against a powerful enemy in the dark. In addition, he felt that the drug wasn't very important, so in private, he did ask the enemy to personally investigate it. However, the deal didn't go through, which made him feel relieved. He had completely changed the laboratory, leaving no trace. He didn't even know that Zhongming knew so much. That old man was indeed not a good person. He had done so much in secret. Chapter 1303. From the beginning to the end, Jing Yunzhao maintained his smile, but his smile was cold and distant. He looked at Li Wenba with nothing but disgust. Zhong Ming is dead? Li Wenba asked. Yes, he was executed. There are photos here to prove it. Jing Yunzhao flipped through a few pages and took out a photo from the thick stack of documents. Li Wenba looked at it and breathed a sigh of relief. How many shares do you want to exchange? Li Wenba asked again. Jing Yunzhao suddenly smiled and said sarcastically, Elderly, your life is very valuable. Since you want to exchange it, of course I want all of it. You have a lot of private assets. Even if you lose the shares of Mingi Group, you can still live a rich life that ordinary people can't compare to. Why do you want to hold on to these things that don't belong to you? Colluding with the enemy and betraying the country has been a serious crime since ancient times. Once this evidence is handed over, do you think it will be as simple as going to jail? Jing Yunzhao said again. Li Wenba was very clear about it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so scared back then and hurriedly dealt with the evidence. It was a pity that Zhong Ming took advantage of the loophole. That person was simply an ingrate. For so many years, how much money and patience had the Li family provided him? Otherwise, how could his medical skills have improved so quickly? Jing Yunzhao, you are good. You are really good. You even dare to threaten your own grandfather. What if I would rather hold on to these shares? Even if I die, I won't give them to you. Aren't you afraid that others will say that you forced your own grandfather to death? Li Wenba suppressed his voice and roared, Ridiculous. There is still a person in front of the country? In other people's eyes, my actions will only be putting righteousness before family. Jing Yunzhao's words made Li Wenba unable to refute. Li Wenba's whole body was weak. He felt as if he had used up all his strength. Okay, but I have to find a professional to appraise it. After a long time, Li Wenba said. Jing Yunzhao smiled and nodded. My time is limited. I need you to sign the transfer of shares within 24 hours. Li Wenba trembled again. He opened the door shakily and almost fell to the ground. Outside the door, Li Shuqi hurriedly supported him. She did not know what had happened, but she was very worried. But what was she worried about? Jing Yunzhao could feel that when she supported Li Wenba, she was looking at the messy documents in her hands. Then, she stared at the photo of Zhong Ming's execution in Li Wenba's hands. At this moment, she suddenly felt that Li Wenba's life was a failure. His eldest son refused to acknowledge him, and his youngest son lost his life. His eldest daughter was forced to give birth to a child by him, and his youngest daughter was young and only had eyes for his assets. Why bother? If he had been able to live well with her grandmother back then, the two of them might have slowly developed feelings for each other. In that case, she would also be respectful and courteous to this so-called grandfather. Unfortunately, there weren't many opportunities to start over in life. Not everyone was as lucky as her. A few hours after Li Wenba left, he appeared again with an expert in appraising documents. After the appraisal, Li Wenba trembled as he signed the contract. All the shares under his name were transferred. From then on, Mingi Group had nothing to do with the Li family. Originally, the two daughters of the Li family also had shares in their hands. However, in the previous battle with her for shares, Li Wenba had gathered all of them. She wondered how the two daughters would feel when they found out that Li Wenba had given away their money. Chapter 1304. Jing Yunzhao looked at the share transfer agreement in her hands with a smile on her face. She looked at Li Wenba with her usual cold gaze. There was indeed only one copy of the document, and she did not make a copy. On one hand, Li Wenba was no fool. If he found out that there was a copy, with his temper, he might really hold on to the shares and not let go no matter what. On the other hand, if Li Wenba was really charged with treason, she would also be affected, and it would be more difficult for Mingi Group's share price to rise back up. Li Wenba was her biological grandfather. This was an undeniable fact. The crime of betraying the country was not light. If Li Wenba was convicted of this crime, it was equivalent to pouring dirty water on her, and Jing sure that could not be washed clean. At this moment, after Li Wenba signed the document, he left tiredly. Jing Yunzhao, on the other hand, was extremely busy. The previous employees of the company were all handpicked by Li Wenba. They were not trustworthy, and they had to be purged. She also had to reorganize the hospitals. In the past, Mingyi Hospital strongly suppressed Chinese medicine, which was one of the reasons why Chinese medicine was declining and had a bad reputation. Now, she naturally had to correct everything. Of course, it was not to the extent of driving out all Western medicine. Each had their own advantages and disadvantages. It would be best to share the limelight or cooperate with each other. School had already started, but Jing Yunjiao took a long leave of absence to reorganize the company and prepare various plans. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Jing Yunjiao also officially renamed the Mingyi Group as the Lingyi Group. Currently, Jing Yunjiao was the highest decision-maker in the group and held a lot of power in her hands. However, she still had a lot of other businesses, so it was hard for her to take care of everything at the same time. Thus, when the dust had settled, the board of directors decided to hire another person to take charge of the company to act on her behalf. This person's resume was all in line with the requirements. Jing Yunjiao even investigated all 3 generations of this person's family thoroughly, so she didn't have to worry that he would do anything to betray her. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Jing Yunjiao was so busy every day that she had a headache. Fortunately, work at night could be done in the space. Otherwise, she did not know how long it would take to completely stabilize the company. During these days, Li Wenbo wasn't idle either. After all, this company used to be his, so his influence in the company wasn't small. Jing Yunjiao suddenly taking control of the company had a huge impact on that group of people, so there were quite a few obstructions in the background. However, Jing Yunjiao's years of training with Bai Yuan and Qin Shui had been in vain. She would counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. When she did things, she was decisive and didn't leave the slightest bit of face. When Li Wenbo was still in charge, the company's performance was already at its worst, and Jing Yunjiao's appearance didn't change the situation at first. After all, the company's changes were too big, and some of the shareholders who couldn't hold on to the company all withdrew their shares. Jing Yunjiao then took the opportunity to take back all the shares that Li Wenbo had previously won over. Now, she held the majority of the shares in the company, and the rest was owned by the Jing clan members, so she knew them well. Jing Yunjiao won this battle beautifully. In contrast, Li Wenbo had aged 10 years in just 3 months. Now, the Lingyi Group was thriving. Since the opening, it had been rising steadily. Most importantly, it was extremely popular. It cooperated with Chinese and Western medicine. Even the media said that the young man, Jing Yunjiao, had changed the medical era. Now, there were comparisons between Li Wenbo and Jing Yunjiao everywhere. Every time Li Wenbo saw it, he would vomit more blood in his heart. The only thing he was thankful for was that his eldest daughter's pregnancy was very smooth. In half a year, she would be able to give birth. At that time, he would leave everything to her. Chapter 1305. The Li family hadn't heard laughter in months. At this time, Li Shuyuan was sitting beside Li Wenbo with a big belly. She was holding a medical book on her back and her eyelids were trembling. Sure, Yijiao's face had almost recovered, but there were still some traces of new flesh. Under the disguise of makeup, it was not serious. She was wearing a black lace dress and looked at her mother's belly quietly with disgust in her eyes. Her mother had considered having another child after giving birth to her, but she hadn't succeeded. She had checked over the years, but no problems had been found. However, because her mother had promised her grandfather that she would give birth to an heir for the Li family, her parents had gone for another checkup and found out that her father was infertile. Her grandfather knew this, but he kept asking and even used her as a threat. The baby in her mother's belly was a test tube baby. It was the child of a strange man, not her father's, and that man, she had secretly asked around and found out that her grandfather had personally found him. He was an ordinary doctor without much influence, but he was quite talented. This brother of hers was a monster. Shuri Jiao thought, "Dad, I'm really tired. Can I rest for a while?" Li Shuyuan asked with pain on her tired face. "Shuyuan, you should read more medical books now. In the future, the children will also be interested in these things. The children of the Li family must be one step ahead of the children of other families when they start. Do you understand?" Li Wenbo became a little gloomy. Upstairs, Li Shuqi heard this and curled her lips sarcastically. She returned to her room. Dad, it's not good for the child if I'm in a bad mood. Li Shuyuan was a little uncomfortable. She felt like a childbirth machine at this moment. In the past, she had only heard of in-laws asking their daughters-in-law to keep giving birth. She didn't expect that instead of suffering in her in-law's house, she would be forced by her own father. And, because of her father, even her husband was chased out of the Li family for fear that he would mistreat the child. You're in a bad mood? Li Wenba's old face showed some displeasure. He looked at Shi Yijiao and said, I think it's because of Jiao Jiao's nonsense. If it doesn't work, let her go abroad for the time being. Hearing this, Li Shuyuan's face paled. She quickly smiled and said, Dad, Jiao Jiao didn't say anything. Maybe it's because the room is too stuffy. I'll go out for a walk later. Also, it's tiring for my eyes to read all the time. It's not good for the child. I'll let her read it to me. Don't let her go abroad. Li Wenba's old face was expressionless, which was somewhat terrifying to the mother and son. Shi Yijiao never knew that the grandfather who doted on her so much turned out to be like this, cold and ferocious. As for her grandmother, she only listened to her grandfather. She didn't think about her children at all. Then let her read it, Li Wenba said after a while. Li Shuyuan didn't dare to be perfunctory. She quickly stuffed the book into Shi Yijiao's hands. Jiao Jiao, be good. Read it to your brother. She flipped open the book. It was densely packed with pharmacology. It was the Chinese medicine that her grandfather hated the most. At this moment, Shi Yijiao suddenly felt that her grandfather was really pitiful. He had clearly lost to Jing Yunjiao, but he still refused to admit it. He even wanted his grandson to start all over again. How could a monster who was born against the will of his parents and marriage be compared to Jing Yunjiao? Chapter 1306. Shi Yijiao's voice was clear as she read slowly. It had been a few hours since she started to read, and the cups of water in front of her disappeared one after another. Li Shuyuan's heart ached, and Li Wenba was reading the newspaper beside her. Whenever he didn't hear Shi Yijiao's voice, he would be unhappy. It was obvious that he was warning her. Peach kernel, safflower, citron, cattail, angelica, trigonum, leech, caterpillar, pangolin, frankincense, myrrh. It has the effect of promoting blood circulation and removing blood stasis. Shi Yijiao read a few more times. Cloves, camellia, musk, etc. can also cause premature birth or miscarriage. Nanxing, cinnabar, realgar, euphorbia, aconite, pokeweed, mackerel, centipede, arsenic, etc. all have a certain degree of toxicity. Realgar can cause abnormalities, and cinnabar can cause small head deformities, deafness, strabismus, and low intelligence. Shi Yijiao's eyes flashed. The piece of meat in her mother's stomach shouldn't have been left. It would be great if it could disappear. Jiao Jiao, you must be tired. It's about time for me to eat. You should rest. Li Shuyuan didn't think too much about it. She felt that it was about time, so she tried to sound her out. She heaved a sigh of relief when she didn't hear her father's unhappy reminder. Shi Yijiao subconsciously memorized all the medicine, then helped Li Shuyuan out of the room. On the third day after Jing Yunjiao returned to school, the people who secretly investigated the Li family sent news that Li Shuyuan's baby was gone. The specific reason wasn't clear, but Li Wenba was so angry that he fainted. He was still hospitalized. When Jing Yunjiao heard the news, she could only sigh, "What a sin," and didn't care about it anymore. However, in the afternoon, a person suddenly appeared in front of her dormitory with an anxious face. This person was Shi Yijiao. If Jing Yunjiao hadn't taken too long off and needed to make up for her classes, Shi Yijiao wouldn't have met her at all. However, since she was already here, Jing Yunjiao thought about it and decided to meet her. The weather was turning cold, and Shi Yijiao was wearing simple pajamas. When she saw her, she almost instantly rushed over. "Cousin, save me." When Jing Yunjiao heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Was this Shi Yijiao stupid? She actually ran to her and asked for help. Was her brain fried? Could it be that he had forgotten how she had tortured him to death when he was treating his illness? "Cousin, I beg you. Only you can save me." Shi Jiao took a few deep breaths. I killed that monster. The monster in my mother's stomach. Grandpa already knows about it. If he hadn't fainted, I wouldn't have been able to escape. I don't have a single dollar on me now. Grandpa has been controlling everyone's cards. I can't leave the country even if I want to. But if I stay at home, Grandpa will definitely find a way to kill me. You don't know, but he's gone crazy. All he knows is that he wants a grandson. Every day, he fantasizes about raising his grandson. He wants that monster to be stronger than you in the future. That's his life. If I do such a thing, he won't let me go. Shi Jiao's face was filled with panic, and her tears kept falling. If Shi Jiao had not done anything wrong to her and Haiqing in the past, perhaps she would have been soft-hearted. But now, her heart was cold and she only felt that Shi Jiao was a joke. Miss Shi, why should I help you shoulder the blame for your own mistakes? Also, even if you don't have money, don't you have any friends? From what I know, you know quite a few rich young masters, right? Jing Yunjiao mocked. Chapter 1307. Rich Young Master? Hearing these words, Shi Jiao quickly shook her head. What kind of status did the Li family have in the past? They were truly rich, and it was natural for her to be friends with them. However, ever since her grandfather lost to Jing Yunjiao, the Li family's wealth had shrunk by more than half. Those people no longer cared about her, and those who were on the same level as her ostracized her because of her arrogance. Now, she did not have a single trustworthy person by her side. Moreover, she could not guarantee that they would not agree to send her abroad only to hand her over to her grandfather. The only thing she could be sure of was that Jing Yunjiao would not do that. Seeing that I call you cousin, can't you help me? Shi Jiao begged and said, speaking of which, I helped you vent your anger, didn't I? Grandfather wants a grandson the most, but I destroyed his hopes and gave him a huge blow. We are now on the same side. Just because you call me cousin doesn't mean that we are related by blood. Jing Yunjiao was very direct. He paused and said, I've already taken back what you owed Haiqing, so I won't do anything to you. However, if you want me to help you, that's impossible. What if I pay the price? Shi Jiao quickly shouted again. The monster my mother was pregnant with was not my father's child. Because of my grandfather's interference, my parents are like fire and water, and they are on the verge of divorce. The Shi family is not a rich family, but they are not weak either. My grandfather was angered by my mother's pregnancy, and now my father is in charge of the family. My father can no longer have children, and I am his only son. As long as you help me, my father will stand on your side. Jing Yunjiao was speechless. If that's the case, why don't you just ask your father directly? It's different. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. All these years, the Shi family has been relying on my grandfather to survive. If my father helps me, then the Shi family will lose everything. With my father's ability, he won't be able to protect those assets. What I want is to see my grandfather pay the price. Only you can. If you help me, my father will give you the business that is connected to the Li family. We father and daughter don't want anything in the future. We just want grandfather to regret it for the rest of his life. At this point, Jing Yunjiao finally understood. Shi Jiao was probably in a hurry, so she didn't express herself clearly. The general meaning was not to send her abroad immediately, but to protect the father and daughter for a while. After the property was transferred to her, they could leave safely together. Otherwise, although both father and daughter could leave in a short period of time, they wouldn't be able to arrange the business. At that time, it would be equivalent to giving it to Li Wenbo for free. In other words, it wouldn't be able to cause any substantial damage to Li Wenbo. Needless to say, a family member who stabbed you in the back was the scariest. Jing Yunjiao looked at Shi Jiao with a half-smile. A few seconds later, he said, Aren't you afraid that I won't do anything useful after taking your things? No. Shi Jiao smiled bitterly. If it was in the past, I might think so. But back then, when I spread rumors about Xiao Haiqing, you did too much. I believe that you'll definitely do what you promised, right? Shi Jiao's eyes flickered, and her heart was beating like a drum. At that time, she felt some regret in her heart. She didn't expect Jing Yunjiao to do so much to clear Xiao Haiqing's name. She also admitted that if something happened to her friends, she definitely wouldn't have done so much. So, she felt that once Jing Yunjiao made a promise, he would definitely do it. After all, she was different from her grandfather and the others. Chapter 1308. As far as I know, you have an aunt, right? Li Shuqi seems like a kind person. Jing Yunjiao didn't agree immediately. Aunt? Her? Shi Yijiao's expression suddenly became a little interesting. She said sarcastically, my grandfather is ambitious, my mother is stupid, and my aunt, Li Shuqi, is the most hypocritical person in the family. To tell you the truth, the medicine I gave my mother was secretly revealed to me by Li Shuqi. I only asked her where I could get those things. She clearly knew what I wanted to do, but she still told me in detail. She even reminded me of some things. Otherwise, do you think I could have succeeded so easily? You have to know that there are people watching over my mother's food and drink. If it wasn't for her help in private, I wouldn't have succeeded. She's playing with a borrowed knife. But after all, they both have their own motives, so I just didn't expose her. Shi Yijiao said again. At this time, Jing Yunjiao finally showed a look of understanding. That was no wonder. Li Wenba was a very careful person, and Shi Yijiao was just a brainless little girl. It was strange that everything went so smoothly. Li Wenba really raised a nest of black-hearted wolves. Li Shuyuan was already 4 or 5 months pregnant, but Li Shuqi and Shi Yijiao still had the heart to do it. Okay, I can help you. But if your father can't do what you said, I will immediately send you to Li Wenba personally. Jing Yunjiao held a recording pin in his hand and shook it gently. He believed that if Li Wenba knew about this, he would be so angry that he would faint again. Shi Yijiao was stunned, but she quickly nodded firmly. After thinking about it, Jing Yunjiao gave her second uncle a call and told him to find a place to send her over for the time being. However, before her second uncle sent someone over to pick her up, she could temporarily stay in the dormitory and change out of her pajamas. You go in first. I still have something to do, Jing Yunjiao said after sending her to the dormitory door. Shi Yijiao nodded. Jing Yunjiao then turned and walked to the corridor. After a few seconds, he said, "Come out." As soon as his voice fell, a well-behaved figure stood out from the corner. "Sister," Jing Fan called out in a panic. "Tell me, why were you eavesdropping?" Jing Yunjiao said coldly. When Jing Fan heard this, she hurriedly shook her head nervously. Her voice stuttered. Sister, I was just curious." She looked very strange. Jing Yunjiao sighed. Jing Fan was a good person. His eyes were clear and his appearance was pleasant. However, although she had changed many things about him, the only thing he couldn't change was his past. In the past, Xiang Jin would always tell her that Jing Fan wanted to see her. However, every time she heard it, she would choose to reject it. It was not because she hated it, but because she knew that Jing Fan would become different every time he saw her. She would be nervous, afraid, worried about her gains and losses, and would completely lose herself because of her tone. She was willing to continue funding her school, so she must have put in the effort to observe her every move. Jing Fan was a relatively sunny and gentle girl in school. Her parents had already been released from prison and had looked for her before, but she had rejected them. In fact, she was also a smart girl. She was no longer as weak as before. But when she saw her, it was as if time would flow backward, and she would become unconfident. "Don't do this next time. There are some things that you can't listen to," Jing Yunjiao said. Jing Fan hurriedly nodded. When Jing Yunjiao was about to leave, Jing Fan suddenly said, "Sister, I'm your junior now. I got into a university and was the top scholar in Yang province, but my score wasn't as high as yours." Chapter 1309. Jing Yunjiao stopped in her tracks. She was indeed a little surprised. She had taken a long leave of absence and had been very busy. The other company matters were still taken care of by Qin Shui and Pak Yuan. They tried not to bother her as much as possible. In the past, Xiang Jin would often tell her about Jing Fan's scores, but this time, she did not say anything. Therefore, she had forgotten about it. Not bad. Jing Yunjiao smiled. When she smiled, Jing Fan's eyes were a little moved. The excitement on her face was self-evident. After a while, she said, I've wanted to see you for a long time, but Sister Xiang said that you were very busy, so I haven't contacted you. But I heard a lot about you in school. Every time she heard it, she wanted to tell everyone that Jing Yunjiao was her sister. However, every time she thought of what her parents had done to her, she instantly lost her confidence. Everything she had now was given to her by Jing Yunjiao, but she had never done anything to her. Sometimes, she was very afraid that one day, she would become useless and disappoint her. She would never be able to see her again and be her sister. By the way, what are you studying? Jing Yunjiao asked. Secretarial. Jing Fan's voice became weaker. She was an ordinary girl who was not even 17 years old. Jing Yunjiao could still understand what she was thinking, so she said, every profession has its own master. Since you've studied, work harder. Try not to be a vase. Even secretaries had ranks. She believed that Jing Fan would not just be a simple errand girl. When she spoke to Jing Fan, Jing Yunjiao seemed to subconsciously become a little strict. Perhaps it was because she expected better from Jing Fan. Jing Fan nodded repeatedly, like a chick pecking at rice. It had to be said that in front of her, this pure and kind appearance looked easier to bully. In comparison, she preferred her outstanding and confident appearance outside. After chatting for a while, Jing Fan left. Jing Yunjiao sighed in her heart. She was not a soft-hearted person, especially when it came to someone like Jing Fan. Her parents had almost forced her into a dead end. Logically speaking, no matter how good Jing Fan was, she would not get close to him. However, every time she saw Jing Fan, she would remember how she was like in her previous life. She would be cautious, nervous, afraid, and fantasize. She didn't want Jing Fan's fantasy to come to nothing in the end. After all, only a small part of her beautiful life had started. She still had a long way to go. Since she had the ability, she didn't mind giving her a bright future. Perhaps in Jing Fan's eyes, she was a noble person. However, in the past, she also hoped that she could meet a noble person. It could be considered as a form of sustenance. After the two parted ways, Jing Yunjiao returned to her dormitory. She sighed in her heart because her dormitory was really far away from Jing Yunjiao's building. After walking a few steps downstairs, Jing Fan was suddenly pulled by someone. You were peeping at Jing Yunjiao just now. A boy stared at her and said. Jing Fan jumped in fright and quickly pulled his hand back. How did you know? You were secretly following her? What are you trying to do? No, I live in the opposite dormitory and accidentally saw it, Han Nin said in a muffled voice. He carefully looked at the junior in front of him. She seemed to be a little younger than the other juniors and looked a little familiar. He heard that this year, there was also a top scorer from Yang Province. Her results were not as good as Jing Yunjiao's, but she was still very good. She was very beautiful and coincidentally, she had the same surname as Jing Yunjiao. What's your relationship with Jing Yunjiao? Han Nin asked again. Chapter 13:10. Han Nin stared at Jing Fan. Jing Fan had skipped a grade in his studies and was younger than the other students in the school. Being stared at by Han Nin, he blushed. But thinking about what Han Nin had asked, he thought for a moment and said, I don't know her. I heard from my roommates that Jing Yunjiao Sr. is very powerful, so I was curious and wanted to see what she looked like. Jing Fan said nervously. Han Nin looked at Jing Fan carefully. He didn't think it was that simple, but then he thought about it carefully. Although they both had the same surname, Jing Yunjiao was Mayor Su's niece. The internet even said that she was the only descendant of the Jing Yunjiao. Although the girl in front of him was from the Yang province, she couldn't be related to Jing Yunjiao. Han Nin's expression relaxed. I'm Han Nin, your senior. I'm in the same class as Jing Yunjiao. You're Jing Fan, right? I've seen your picture on the school forum. Han Nin said. Jing Fan's face turned red again. She rarely got close to boys. On one hand, she didn't want to waste her time and affect her studies. On the other hand, she knew that she was young. If she fell in love, Xiangjin and Jing Yunjiao would be worried. But after coming to a university, she got to know a lot of people. Her roommates gossiped about boys every day. Every time she heard it, She blushed. You're classmates with her? She's very powerful, isn't she? I heard that she's a student of a very respected old professor. Jing Fan's voice was a little excited. You don't seem to hate her. Han Nin said. Why would I hate her? Jing Fan didn't understand. But when she saw the other person's expression, she became suspicious. She said warily, You have a grudge with her? Of course not. I admire her very much. But I thought that as a girl, you would be jealous of her. Han Nin thought for a moment and said. After saying that, the two of them walked a few steps together and finally sat down in a nearby pavilion. If it was in the past, Jing Fan wouldn't deliberately get close to boys. But this person in front of her was Jing Yunjiao's classmate, so she was curious. She wanted to take the opportunity to find out more about Jing Yunjiao's daily life. I can't possibly be jealous of her. As soon as he sat down, Jing Fan said with a smile. Then, he continued, I've never seen someone as dazzling as her. Did you know? She wasn't like this before. At this point, Jing Fan's heart shrank and he hurriedly explained, It's because I'm from Yang Province, so I've heard more stories. After saying that, Jing Yunjiao was secretly annoyed. She was so proud of herself. She didn't want to hear rumors that Jing Yunjiao had a sister from tomorrow onwards. Although that would be very beneficial to her, she also knew in her heart that with Jing Yunjiao's identity, there must be a lot of people who would try to get involved with her. She didn't want to be used by others and become a raft for others to get close to Jing Yunjiao. This point, Xiang Jin had warned her a long time ago. But at this time, Jing Fan didn't know that the senior in front of him wasn't as friendly as he appeared to be. During the conversation, Han Nin couldn't help but take a few more glances at Jing Fan. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He didn't know if it was because of the environment in Yang Province, but this junior in front of him looked very beautiful. Her eyes were clean and gentle, with a kind of demure beauty. She wasn't like Jing Yunjiao, who was so flamboyant. Chapter 13:11. Jing Fan was flustered by his stare. She hurriedly stood up and said, I still have something to do. I'll head back first. Wait a minute. Han Nin called out. Then, he continued, Take down my phone number. If you need anything in the future, you can come find me. There's no need. Jing Fan subconsciously said. It's okay. Don't worry. I won't bother you often. Next time, I'll give you our class schedule. That way, you won't have to go see her, Han Nin said. Many students in this cohort became fans when they heard the name Jing Yunjiao. In the 2 or 3 months before Jing Yunjiao came to class, there were often people who came to observe her, hoping to see her. In his opinion, this kind of behavior was hopelessly stupid because Jing Yunjiao was a heartless person. Just like him, he was clearly very good to her. He gave her gifts, helped her as much as possible with class matters, and even fought with another boy for her. But what about Jing Yunjiao? She still didn't even look at him. She was like an emotionless person who wouldn't be moved at all. He also wanted to withdraw. He also wanted to completely bury Jing Yunjiao in his heart, but he couldn't do it. Every time he thought of her, it was as if there were countless insects biting him nonstop, causing him to toss and turn in bed every night, causing him to be unable to sleep. He couldn't help but draw her name on a piece of paper 1,000,000 times. Jing Fan's heart was also moved. She also wanted to ask Jing Yunjiao what kind of classes she usually attended so that she could sneak a peek when she was free. However, she was too embarrassed to ask. She also wanted to go to Jing Yunjiao's class and make a copy when she was free. However, the senior in front of her had already spoken to this extent. If she continued to reject him, it wouldn't make sense. After all, the other party had good intentions. Moreover, she didn't know what kind of relationship this senior had with Jing Yunjiao. If they were good friends, it wouldn't be good if he found out that she was rude. After hesitating for a while, she nodded and gave him her phone number. Han Nin wrote it down and called her again before saying goodbye to her and leaving. It was just a small interlude, so Jing Fan didn't take it to heart. Jing Yunjiao also didn't know what Han Nin had done. That day, Jing Yunjiao secretly brought Shi Yijiao to meet her father. At the same time, he began to study the documents provided by her father. Li Wenba also had many private properties, all of which were more profitable. Among them, the one that had the greatest impact on the Li family was the development of an underground shopping mall. Shi Yijiao's father was considered a collaborator. The underground shopping mall covered an area of more than 300,000 square meters and cost more than 1 billion yuan. Once it was completed, his net worth would multiply several times even without the Spirit Crane Group. This was also the reason why Li Wenba was never in a hurry. However, Li Wenba had used a lot of his private assets to build this underground shopping center, so he didn't have much liquid capital on hand. Shi Yijiao's father had a lot of information about the shopping mall below. Jing Yunjiao looked at it carefully and found that the shopping mall was now in pre-sale. The sales were very good, and there were a lot of people who wanted to buy the shops at sky-high prices. However, it would take about 1.5 years to complete the project. The main reason was that Li Wenba didn't pass the various procedures, and Su Yuantech was pressuring him, so the construction process was very slow. However, no matter how capable Su Yuantech was, it wouldn't be good if he didn't work for the people. Therefore, he could only make Li Wenba unhappy, but it was impossible for him to be ruthless. Chapter 13:12. If it was in the past, Jing Yunjiao really wouldn't know what to do with this underground shopping center. If she were to do something behind the scenes, this huge mess would probably cause a lot of people to not be able to live a good life. But now, Shi Yijiao's father had given her a handle. There were not many problems with the underground shopping center, but there was a huge problem with the materials. Ever since the rise of Immortal Crane Hall, Li Wenba's income had been greatly reduced. It was even more so during this period. Li Wenba's pockets were tight. If he wanted to continue building the underground shopping center, he had to tighten his belt. Hence, he was very frugal in all aspects. There were some problems with the materials, but when the higher-ups came to investigate, Li Wenba could always find a way to fool them. But this time, Shi Yijiao's father had betrayed him. It was hard for him to hide. Immediately, Jing Yunjiao handed the materials to first uncle, Su Yuantech. Su Yuantech had been looking for trouble with Li Wenba, but he did not have a chance. Now that he had a handle in his hands, he naturally knew how to use it. He quickly sent people to investigate. This investigation directly exposed the situation at the construction site. At this time, Li Wenba was still in the hospital. His blood pressure was high, and he should not be agitated. He had just recovered from the news that he lost his grandson, and this huge bomb stunned him. The matter of the materials was only known to a few people whose interests were linked together. No one would be so stupid as to sell themselves out. The only people who could possibly do this were Shi Yijiao, who had disappeared for a few days, and her father, Shi Jinlei. Second brother, quickly go and find your uncles for help. Li Wenba was very weak, and he could barely catch his breath. Li Shuqi hurriedly nodded. She wanted to call them, but after careful consideration, she decided to visit a few uncles in person. However, none of them invited her in. In the end, she had no choice but to call them. However, all of them refused her request. Some declined politely, while others mocked and ridiculed her. After Mingi Group was gone, she had already experienced this feeling. But now, it was even more intense. Dad, they just ignore me. Li Shuqi was a little upset. Why did her father not give the family property to her earlier? She always felt that if the family property was in her hands, things would not have turned out like this. Li Wenba had already thought of this, but he was unwilling to admit it. In the hospital, her heart was like dead ashes and her face was full of despair. The news was still about the shopping mall below. In less than 2 hours, someone had already found the hospital and asked for a refund. Many people had already bought shops, and the money spent was not small. Now that there was a problem with the building materials, how could everyone be at ease? It was reasonable to ask for a refund. However, it might be possible to refund a few people, but they were facing more than a few people at the moment. The funds that they had earned from these people had already been used elsewhere. Where would they get the money to pay them back? If there was a hospital, he might have been able to fill this huge hole, but now, Li Wenba felt physically and mentally exhausted. He quickly hired dozens of bodyguards to guard the door to prevent anyone from entering. The incident in the shopping mall caused a huge commotion. At this time, Jing Yunjiao had already fulfilled his promise and sent Shi Yijiao and her father out. This is Jing Yunjiao's doing again. Second brother, Tell Xiao Xia to come over. After a few days, the construction site had been suspended. Li Wenba thought about it, but there was no other way to deal with Jing Yunjiao. In the end, he thought of Ruan Xiaoxia. Chapter 13:13. When Ruan Xiaoxia arrived, she was wearing a white woolen coat. Her beauty was mesmerizing. Compared to Li Wenba, one looked very healthy, while the other looked like he was about to die. Xiaoxia. Lin Feng looked at her and held her goddaughter's hand affectionately. Ruan Xiaoxia gently pulled her hand away. Why are you looking for me? Lin Feng looked at her in disbelief and said, Xiaoxia, why are you so cold? What's with your attitude? We're your parents. Your father is in the hospital now. Even if we're not looking for you, you should come. It's my godfather and godmother. Ruan Xiaoxia smiled. What do you mean? Why are you betraying us now? Xiaoxia, have you forgotten who you are? Aren't you afraid that I'll ask Priest Qi to come here? Lin Feng said angrily. If Priest Qi is still alive, he would have come to see you a long time ago, right? I used to think that he was still in the Li family. But now that I think about it, if he was still alive, you would have asked him to come personally when Jing Yunjiao cured Qi Yu's illness. Why would you wait until now? Besides, even if Priest Qi was still alive, do you think he would help you? In the past, the Li family was still powerful. But now, all they have is a pile of debt and a valuable but useless house. She was taught martial arts by an old Taoist. When she was young, the Taoist was only about 30 years old. He was different from the Taoist she imagined him to be. She heard that he was chased away from the mountain because he made a mistake. He was obsessed with martial arts and was very evil. He was a Taoist, but he liked women very much. If he didn't lose his virginity, many girls in the world would have been killed by him. When Priest Qi was taken in by Li Wenba, he promised Li Wenba that he could teach martial arts to a girl. The girl had to be beautiful enough. After a lot of selection, she was the only one chosen by the Taoist. After so many years, she couldn't even believe how she had survived. Countless times, she was touched by those disgusting hands. Countless times, she felt like a snake was staring at her. It made her hair stand on end. But outside, she had to pretend that nothing had happened. At that time, she thought that as long as she became Li Tianyi's wife one day, everything would be fine. Everything would be over. Therefore, Li Tianyi was her sky and everything to her. However, Su Xianlan had snatched away her only support. On the day Li Tianyi disappeared with Su Xianlan, she was humiliated by that beast over and over again. Even though that man could not do much, it still made her feel disgusted. All this time, she had been relying on the Li family to survive. Several of her acupuncture points had been sealed by the Taoist priest using his unique skills. Every 5 years, she would have to be combed through. Otherwise, her breathing would become completely chaotic and she would not be able to use her martial arts. At most, she would only be able to live for another 5 years. However, in recent years, the Taoist priest had stopped looking for her. Perhaps he was already dead. More importantly, she used to think about Li Tianyi, but now, she just wanted all her enemies to die. She wanted the Li family, the Su family, and Jing Yunjiao to disappear completely while she was still alive. Especially Li Wenba, Li Tianyi, and Jing Yunjiao. As long as the 3 of them were dead, even if her life ended, she would die without regrets. Priest Qi has only gone to travel. Xiaoxia, if you don't listen to me, you will suffer when the time comes. Li Wenba did not expect Ruan Xiaoxia to take action at this time. Is that so? Gone to travel? Then who knows when he will return? I think that before he returns, all of you will be gone. Ruan Xiaoxia smiled. Her face, which had been forgotten by time, revealed a trace of coldness. She had also fantasized about having another son to give birth to, but it had all come to naught. Blood flowed, but Li Wenba didn't notice it. Li Shuyuan had locked the bathroom door, so she was discovered after a long time. The emergency treatment was useless. When Li Wenba heard that his eldest daughter was gone, at that moment, he could only stare. He was 3 parts sad, 5 parts angry, and 2 parts resentful. Even his eldest daughter, who had never been smart, was trying to break free from his control. How hateful! How hateful! However, Lin Feng was very sad. After all, she had already lost a son, a granddaughter, and now even her own daughter was gone. One could imagine how she was feeling. The moment she heard the news, she burst into tears. Her old face looked somewhat ugly. Seeing this, Li Wenba became more and more annoyed and out of breath. Chapter 13-15. The Li family's disaster was not over. In fact, it was just the beginning. The investment in the underground shopping center was unable to continue, and in the end, it could only declare bankruptcy. His private assets were originally linked together, so pulling one hair would affect the whole body. In an instant, it collapsed with a loud bang. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Li Wenba mortgaged the shopping center, barely alleviating some of his troubles. As for Jing Yunzhao, she offered a price to buy the underground shopping center. After all, putting aside the building materials, the underground shopping center was indeed a good place. Li Wenba did not have the ability to buy a new batch of materials, but she could. Not only that, but she could also hire professionals to inspect the mall and make all the data of the mall public. Li Wenba's funds had been shrinking, while hers had been expanding. She had the capital to do so. The battle between Jing Yunzhao and Li Wenba lasted until the end of the year. She personally took back all the things in Li Wenba's hands, including several houses of the Li family. In the past, when she stood side by side with Li Wenba, it was indeed a little difficult to deal with him. However, as he grew stronger, it became easier to deal with him. However, after all, they were blood-related. Jing Yunzhao could not risk universal condemnation and kill Li Wenba. If she really did that, she would be criticized for the rest of her life. It was not worth it to bear the crime of killing her own family for such a scum. Of course, in the eyes of others, the previous business conflict was not so serious. After all, it was up to the capable. Besides, when she needed to have a face-to-face conflict with Li Wenba, she tried her best to let her two uncles or Li Xiaoyun appear, while she stayed behind the scenes. When Li Wenba lost everything and his family was living on the streets, she began to stop. However, Jing Yunzhao let Li Wenba go, but there were others who did not. Li Wenba never thought that there would be such a day when he was old. The winter wind was cold and piercing, making him shiver uncontrollably. The family almost had nowhere to go. There were some members of the Li family, but they were not as united as the Jing family. When he robbed Jing Wenyue's family, the Li family began to deal with him, wanting to get a share of the profits. He had taught them a lesson before, so now, no one would help him. In the end, the family stayed in one of Li Shuqi's workrooms. There was no furniture inside, but it was better than outside. Although they still had some money, they could save as much as possible, so this hotel was even more out of the question. Li Shuqi was fuming inside. Lauer, sell this studio after some time. The remaining money should be enough to buy a 3-bedroom apartment. After that, you can go out and find a job. After all, you are also a doctor. Lin Feng expressed Li Wenba's intention. When Li Shuqi heard this, she immediately exploded. Mom, did I hear wrong? I only have this one property, and you want me to sell it? If we keep this place, we can at least collect rent. I can also do something for myself. Do you really want me to continue being a doctor? Go out and ask which hospital wants me now, Li Shuqi said angrily. Not to mention within the country, even overseas wouldn't do. Su Wenqing's business abroad was not small, and he even knew some dukes. As for other countries, she had never been there, so who knew what would happen? Li Shuqi originally had a lot of real estate, but in the past few months, she needed to sell one every once in a while. In the end, she had fewer and fewer. If it weren't for the fact that the studio was too small and in a bad location, it would have been sold out. Even she didn't expect that the place that she used to look down on would now become the most important thing in her heart. Chapter 13-16. Li Shuqi used to be a good girl at home. She was quiet and sensible, which made people feel at ease. However, her current attitude was tough and even a little rude. Li Wenba and his wife were unhappy when they heard that. Your property? Tell me, which thing didn't I give to you? I raised you for so many years and didn't let you suffer at all. Now, you're not even willing to sell your house? What kind of work can you do in such a small place? When the time comes, you'll still be cheated by Jing Yunjiao. You might as well change your residence. Li Wenba said angrily. Dad, I'm your daughter. If you don't raise me, who will? You're still talking about those things. You've given away my shares in my house. Our house is completely sealed. I can't even take out my clothes and shoes. I really don't know what you're thinking. Jing Yunjiao is your granddaughter. You can't even deal with her, and you're implicating the whole family. Also, if you didn't force eldest sister to get pregnant, she wouldn't have committed suicide after the miscarriage. Li Shuqi threw caution to the wind. She didn't care about Li Wenba's face at all. In the past, she would have tolerated it. After all, although her father was selfish, he didn't have a son. If she was lucky, she would get a lot of property. But now, everything was gone. For so many years, in order to reassure her father, she didn't dare to be in a relationship openly. Finding a man was like having an affair. Every day, she prayed that the husband he found for her in the future would be someone she liked. In the end, after so many years, she was going to become an old lady. Now, she had no money or power. She wasn't very beautiful, and there were 2 old worms behind her. Who would want her? Those people from rich families couldn't accept her at all. After all, Jing Yunjiao was too powerful now. Who would dare to go against her? The more Li Shuqi thought about it, the more sullen she felt. She was so angry that she kicked the stool at her feet to the side. Li Wenba looked at her, and his face turned green. If it weren't for the fact that he had suffered so many blows recently and had some tolerance, he would have fainted again. Lin Feng was used to being Li Wenba's understanding flower all these years. Even though she was old, she was still very obedient in front of Li Wenba. She hurriedly patted his back. Li Shuqi laughed mockingly. She didn't care about it at all. She knew better than anyone what kind of people her parents were. Her mother seemed to be obedient, but she was actually very strong. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let that trash of a brother live so miserably all those years. Now that he was in trouble, her mother didn't care. But after all, she was used to the luxurious life of being the head of the family. In less than 3 days, she dared to guarantee that her mother's face would change. As the saying goes, poor couples have 100 sorrows. Her parents were originally married on the basis of benefits. Back then, her father wanted her mother to be honest, and her mother wanted money. That was why they hit it off, but now, Li Shuqi had seen through everything. Therefore, on the first day, she didn't take her parents' orders seriously. She did what she could and ignored what she couldn't. And just as she expected, after only 2 days, Lin Feng, her mother, couldn't hold it in any longer. Previously, he would still take care of Li Wenba, but now, he was standing at the side with a gloomy expression, speaking sarcastically. If you had married me back then, would you have offended the Jing clan? Who asked you to have a pair of snobbish eyes and insist on marrying Jing Wenyue first? You're trying to climb up the social ladder. Look, now that you're old, you're getting your retribution, aren't you? Lin Feng's mouth began to chatter. All these years, she had been complaining in her heart. Originally, the man she liked was just short of marriage, but in the end, he was snatched away by Jing Wenyue. How could she not hate him? Chapter 13-17. However, several decades had passed, and Jing Wenyue had long turned into a pile of bones. Her resentment and hatred had become fainter and fainter. It was only now that it all gushed out. She had seen Jing Wenyue before. When she was young, that woman was like the moon in the sky, and she was like an inconspicuous star beside her. The moment she sat in Jing Wenyue's position, she felt really happy. It would be great if it could continue. Li Wenba's body was a little weaker than before, and because he had been exposed to some cold wind when he moved away, he now had a fever. Hearing Lin Feng's words, his blood surged. She didn't think about it. Who gave him so many peaceful days? With his status, how many women couldn't he find when he was young? But wasn't she the only one he had? Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost his son in the end. Shut up. Li Wenba weakly spat out 2 words. Lin Feng became even angrier when she heard this. You think I'll shut up just because you said so? Do you think you're still the same as before? If you could conjure money, I would listen to you. But now, you can't even provide a warm place to live. If it weren't for my daughter, I would have frozen to death. I think even if I have to shut up, it should be you. Lin Feng was very smart. She clearly knew who the only person she could rely on now was. If her daughter didn't care about them, the two of them wouldn't be able to survive at all. In the past, her husband was her sky, but from now on, her daughter was. She was also somewhat glad. Although her daughter's temper wasn't as kind and sensible as she appeared to be, after all, she had been spoiled by her for so many years. She probably wouldn't do something like abandoning them. If it really didn't work, she would give this old man to Jing Yunjiao. Wasn't Li Wenba her biological grandfather? Now that he was in such dire straits, how could he not support his granddaughter? Lin Feng kept thinking in her heart. At this time, Li Wenba really wanted to vomit to death. He stared at his wife, wishing he could beat her to death, while the husband and wife were staring at each other. A knock suddenly came from the door, scaring the three of them. Li Shuqi frowned. A trace of expectation flashed in her heart. She imagined that perhaps her former friends knew that she wasn't doing well and came to help. Heaving a sigh of relief, he tidied himself up, walked over, and opened the door. However, when the door opened, they were immediately stunned. They saw a group of people rushing in. After glancing at the three of them, they directly dragged them away. What are you trying to do? Was it that little bitch Jing Yunjiao who told you guys to come? Don't you know that I'm her aunt? How dare you treat us like this? Aren't you afraid that you'll be drowned in spittle if word gets out? Li Shuqi felt the pain coming from her arm and immediately began to shout. No one had ever dared to touch her like this since she was young. These men emitted a very unpleasant smell. There was the smell of alcohol and cigarettes. It was as if they had not bathed in a long time. Smelling it made people want to vomit. Jing Yunjiao, that black-hearted girl, they were already in such dire straits, but she still wouldn't let them off. Moreover, she had never done anything wrong to Jing Yunjiao. If she wanted to take revenge, couldn't she just look for her father and mother? Why did she have to include her? Li Shuqi was scolding, but Li Wenba and Lin Feng suddenly became mute. At this time, they thought of a possibility. Not long ago, Ruan Xiaoxia said in front of them. Chapter 13:18. Li Wenba and Lin Feng remained silent. Their faces were pale as they were dragged away mercilessly. Not long after, they were shoved into a car. A man was sitting in the front passenger seat of the car. The man's back was handsome, and his side profile made Lin Feng's heart skip a beat. Li Shuqi was stunned. Isn't he Jing Yunjiao? You. Who are you to Jing Yunjiao? Did he ask you to do it? Let me tell you, it's illegal. Li Shuqi said guiltily. The man rubbed his fingers together as if he had just heard a joke. Illegal? The Li family has broken many laws, right? Li Wenba, elderly, don't you think so? Li Wenba's heart trembled. You're Jean Iran? He asked with a trembling voice. In the past, he had bodyguards protecting him and had a lot of power. Not many people dared to do anything to him. Now, it was different. Even if he was thrown into the river and drowned, no one would care. Now, his life was insignificant and would not affect others in the slightest. Moreover, it was the new year, and the outside world was bustling with noise and excitement. Previously, the incident in the underground shopping mall had made him famous, but the heat of the incident had already passed, and no one cared about the life and death of his family. Smart. You're indeed elderly. You recognized me at a glance. Jean Iran complimented him. Following that, he took off his sunglasses. His handsome face carried a hint of wickedness and viciousness. He turned around and looked at Li Shuqi. Miss Li's looks may not be on the same level as Jing Yunjiao's, but they're still not bad. Today, I'm indebted to elderly for giving me face. I'll gladly accept your daughter. Janiran, if you want to take revenge, you should look for Su Yuantek. He was the one who killed your father. Li Wenba said immediately. Li Shuqi was dumbfounded. She was stunned and did not speak. She did not even understand. Genie Ran laughed when he heard this. His eyes were like a poisonous snake as he said in a cold voice, "I am an illegitimate child. Even if my father is still alive, I will never be able to see the light of day. Furthermore, I have only seen him a few times. It doesn't matter to me whether he is still alive or not. But you killed my mother with your own hands," Geniran said coldly. After saying that, he chuckled softly. "Elderly, you only sent people to do it back then. You probably don't know what my mother looks like, right? You're the one who did it, but you don't even know what the other party looks like. This is too unreasonable." Then, Li Wenba took out a photo. In the photo was a young woman with a child. Her smile was bright and beautiful, as if she had the most precious happiness in the world. This was far from what Li Wenba had in mind. In his opinion, a woman who could be a man's mistress was definitely not a good woman. She might not even be loyal. She had already been touched countless times. Chapter 1319. For the first time, Li Wenba felt threatened. It was a threat that was even more terrifying than Jing Yunjiao. After all, Jing Yunjiao was his granddaughter. He felt that no matter how they fought, it had nothing to do with her life. She only wanted the Jing family's assets, not his life. However, Jean Iran was different. "Your mother said, to remember kindness and not resentment," Li Wenba said in a trembling voice. Jean Iran sneered. "Yes, but what happened in the end? From the day she died, I said that one day, I will make the person who killed her suffer 1,000 times more. I used to think that it was Su Yuantek, but I found out later that it was you." The three people in the back seat felt a chill in their hearts. Li Shuqi finally understood that this man was here for revenge. Her father got into trouble again, and now she was implicated. How could this be? She struggled to get up, and a sense of crisis made her rush to the car door without a care for her life. However, as soon as she hit the car door, she felt a cold object aimed at her forehead, and her hair stood on end. Bullets don't have eyes. It wouldn't look good if a delicate young lady like you were shot with a bloody hole. Jeannie Rand sneered. Li Shuqi immediately became obedient. She wanted to live, but she wanted to live. It was all done by Li Wenba. "It has nothing to do with us," Lin Feng hurriedly shouted from the side. "My mother and I were innocent back then. Why didn't he let us off? If you want to blame someone, blame him. Who asked him to do such a thing?" Janiran said slowly, but it gave people a feeling of urgency. The car sped away, and Li Wenba felt as if his life was coming to an end. After an unknown amount of time, they finally stopped at a place. The three of them were dragged in together. They saw that there were burly men in black all around. They looked very fierce and terrifying. This place was very noisy. However, the three of them went to the back door. The place they arrived at was a basement, which was isolated from everything above. "Okay, let's take a look at the last place in your life. Are you satisfied?" Jean Iran smiled and clapped his hands. Soon, he pulled open the dark curtains in front of them. Suddenly, the lights were turned on, and Li Shuqi screamed. "I don't want it. I want to leave. You can't do this to me." Li Shuqi quickly begged for mercy. In front of her was a glass room, occupied by all kinds of strange insects. It was divided into two parts. One of the rooms was empty, but she believed that the man in front of her would not be so kind as to let her stay in that empty room. "You're a woman, and I've always been tolerant of women. Of course, those things aren't targeting you. You're going to the room next door. From today onwards, you'll have to serve customers until I'm satisfied. Otherwise, you'll become a toy for snakes, insects, rats, and ants, just like your parents. People will watch you struggle," Jean Iran said. After saying that, he directly lifted his feet and walked out. In the next second, the men in front of them began to use great strength to divide the three of them into two rooms. Li Wenba and Lin Feng were old, but they had never seen such a scene. Their legs began to weaken, but before they could beg for mercy, they were pushed into the room. In an instant, they felt as if all the insects were crawling towards them, and they felt numb and painful. On the other side, Li Shuqi also entered the glass room. Seeing her parents drowned in the insects and unable to hear anything, goosebumps rose all over her body and she trembled. A few minutes later, a man came into her room and almost directly pounced on her. Chapter 1320. This place was an underground market, and there were only Jean Iran's men. These people would not even feel sympathy for this family of three. Li Shuqi used to be a pure and innocent girl. Even though she had a few men in secret, she did not go too far, especially in front of so many people. In another glass room, there were even her parents. At this moment, she suddenly felt that her elder sister's death was a relief. At least she did not have to suffer this kind of humiliation like her. She used to be the most promising doctor in the medical field and the proud daughter of the Li family. She should have a bright future, but at this moment, she was being treated like this in such a disgusting place. She was just an innocent person, but she was reduced to such a state. She was really unwilling to accept it. Her eyes were wide open, and there was no joy in her body. She only felt like a dead fish, full of despair. However, just as she was resisting in this way, the man on top of her suddenly said, "Miss Li, do you still remember me? 3 years ago, my sister was your patient. Just because I said a few bad things about you behind your back, you let her die on the operating table. You thought that you did it secretly, but in fact, God was watching. After the hospital changed doctors, someone found me and told me the truth." Li Shuqi's body jumped. She suddenly felt that the man in front of her was so familiar. It turned out that she had seen him before. At that time, she had been a doctor for less than 2 years. Many people doubted her ability and said that she got in because of her connections. She was very uncomfortable. Later, she happened to hear that the patient's family members were hesitating whether to change doctors or even change hospitals. At that time, she was burning with anger. This man doubted her ability and was worried that her skills were not up to standard, so he did not dare to let her take care of his sister. Later, she asked the hospital to agree to his request to change doctors. However, during the operation, she pretended that she wanted to learn, so she became an assistant. During the operation, she deliberately made a mistake, which caused the woman's death. At that time, the operation was dangerous and the success rate was not very high, so it was perfectly concealed. However, she did not expect that this man would come to find her today. The doctor at that time was not me. Li Shuqi's voice was a little breathless. When the man heard this, he exerted force and grabbed Li Shuqi's neck with both hands. He couldn't wait to make her pay for his sister's life. He said coldly, "You're not the one who said that, but you're the assistant. If I had known that you were one of the medical staff, I would never have agreed to this operation." Li Shuqi felt like she was about to suffocate. Her vision grew dimmer and dimmer, but just as her consciousness was about to dissipate, a gust of air suddenly entered her nose. She immediately regained her senses and realized that the man in front of her had already let go of her. "I couldn't offend you in the past, but from now on, you're just a pile of mud on the ground. I'll come every day until the day you die," the man said again. After saying this, Li Shuqi's entire body trembled violently. However, when he recalled the suffocating feeling just now, he felt powerless all over. He didn't even have the heart to take the opportunity to anger him and ask for death, because she felt as if she had touched the doorstep of hell just now. That kind of painful feeling was something that she did not want to experience again. Chapter 1321. Karma was a cycle of retribution, and the sad days repeated themselves every day. Li Wenba also felt the pain of impending death amidst the insects that blotted out the sky and earth. He also felt a nauseating feeling that something was afraid to enter his ears. At that moment, he thought of many things. He even thought of the time when he saw Jing Wenyue many years ago. At that time, he was just a young child. The Li family had been dependent on the Jing family for generations, and Jing Wenyue was the eldest miss in everyone's eyes. Almost at first glance, he was jealous of everything this young miss had, but he also liked her appearance. After all, she was like a bright moon, beautiful beyond compare. When he married her, he was wild with joy. He didn't know if it was because he had satisfied his desire to get closer to the Jing family, or because he had won the heart of a beauty. He only knew that at that time, the sudden satisfaction made him confused for a long time. Later on, when he saw others ignoring him and Jing Wenyue being polite to him, he felt a trace of determination. When Jing Wenyue gave birth, the preparations were very appropriate. The doctors she used were all from the Jing family. However, he found a reckless little girl who ruthlessly bumped into her, causing her to give birth prematurely. After that, he secretly smeared something on the ginseng. That woman, he was indeed the one who killed her. After so many years, it was only at this moment that he seemed to feel some regret. He also knew that Jing Wenyue had a kind personality. Even if she couldn't accept him immediately, as time passed, she would slowly help him. However, at that time, he really couldn't wait, couldn't bear it. Li Wenba opened his mouth, and scenes flashed through his mind. His heartbeat suddenly became rapid and weak, and he felt as if something was stuck in his throat. He felt extremely uncomfortable. Suddenly, he collapsed, and his breathing slowly stopped. When Lin Feng saw this, she covered her mouth and screamed. She even subconsciously kicked Li Wenba's body to the side. After being husband and wife for so many years, there was some heartache. However, it was offset by the suffering of the past few days, and was replaced by fear at this moment. Lin Feng's body was slightly better, and she held on for more than a month. During this month, she had eaten many insects, and her body was covered in wounds. She even lost a portion of her flesh. She had seen everything her daughter had experienced. At the beginning, she was screaming and begging for mercy, but slowly, she felt despair, and finally, she was numb to death. Next to her was a skeleton that had been eaten clean by insects in a short period of time. She knew what her fate was. When Lin Feng breathed her last, Lin Feng's bloody eyes stared straight at Li Wenba's skeleton on the ground. It was unknown whether she wanted to apologize or complain. But it looked a little horrifying. After the husband and wife couple were dead, Jeannie ran. She had seen countless men in the past. In the past few days, she had seen countless men. At first, she was indeed numb, but later, she was hurt. After that, she was hurt, and then she tried hard to adapt. Learning. Now that she had changed into a set of clean and enchanting clothes, it was as if she was a prostitute. Even from afar, one could smell the scent of her body that attracted men, only of it. When? She just sighed and did not sympathize with him at all. Her grandmother, father, mother, and all of their tragedies were caused by her grandfather. Therefore, she could not bear to see such an old man suffer. Chapter 1322. As for Li Shuqi, Jing Yunjiao had never thought of saving her from that place. Li Shuqi had always had the attitude of a bystander, using the people around her, even her own family. Moreover, everything that Li Wenbo and Shi Yijiao had done before, Jing Yunjiao didn't believe that Li Shuqi hadn't pushed them. She only appeared to have a pair of clean hands on the surface, but she had done many evil things behind the scenes. She was even worse than Shi Yijiao. Shi Yijiao was young and arrogant, but she was different. Hence, Jing Yunjiao did not intervene in the matters of the Li family. However, Jing Yunjiao could roughly guess that the person who killed Jean Iran's mother back then was not her eldest uncle, but Li Wenba. Otherwise, there was no reason for him to take action. Furthermore, the two families were in a fierce fight back then, so it was very likely that Li Wenba would do such a thing. Jean Iran's eldest uncle was watching over him, and currently, the police were also fighting a battle of wits and courage with him. After Jing Yunjiao was rid of the Li family, she was completely relaxed for a period of time and began to prepare to meet Li Xiaoyun's parents. The relationship between the two had always been smooth, and old Master Li was very satisfied with her. However, it was more or less against the rules to meet Li Xiaoyun's parents. Hence, after the end of the year, Jing Yunjiao changed into a slightly gentle-looking outfit and drove to the Li family's house with Li Xiaoyun. Li Xiaoyun's parents and Old Master Li did not live in the same place. According to Li Xiaoyun, Old Master Li did not dote on his children. Even if he did not lack money, he rarely bought things for his children. The Li family did not lack power, But if Old Master Li and Li Xiaoyun's assets were excluded, the Li family could not be considered rich. Of course, Old Master Li's assets were not small. There were many antiques and some ancient paintings in the house, and each of them was very expensive. Li Xiaoyun was even more so. Jing Yunjiao was wearing a white beige down jacket, and her small face was wrapped in the furry collar. At this moment, her arrogant temperament was much more concealed, and she looked like a beautiful and quiet girl next door. Not long after, the car stopped at the entrance of the Li family's house. Relatively speaking, the house was not bad, but it could not be compared to the old master's manor. However, since the couple lived alone, it did not need to be too big. Jing Yunjiao carried some gifts in her hands. Most of them were things produced by the space. She carefully selected them, and everything was the best. In addition, she also bought clothes for Li Xiaoyun's mother and a set of high-end limited edition skincare products. The gifts were not light. When he was about to knock on the door, Jing Yunjiao glanced at Li Xiaoyun. He found that Li Xiaoyun looked indifferent. He didn't seem nervous or concerned. Chapter 1323. As soon as Li Xiaoyun finished speaking, he hung up the phone with a bang. In the next second, he asked the driver to start the car. However, just as the car started, a servant suddenly rushed out of the house and quickly ran over to unlock the door. Jing Yunjiao glanced at Li Xiaoyun and smiled slightly. After all, she was a junior, and the people in this house were the parents of the person she loved. If they insisted on making things difficult for her, she couldn't just throw a tantrum. She had to endure it first. Of course, she had never been that kind of person. If it wasn't her fault, it would depend on Li Xiaoyun's attitude. Fortunately, her man treated her well. "Master, Madam called us over to do something just now, so no one heard the doorbell," the servant quickly explained. Li Xiaoyun raised his eyebrows and pursed his thin lips. He was a little unhappy. He didn't understand such a lousy lie. The appliances in this house were the best. When the doorbell was pressed, the phone would ring from inside, and they could directly see the situation outside. It was absolutely impossible to say that they didn't hear it. "Let's go." Li Xiaoyun put his arm around Jing Yunjiao's shoulder and walked inside. Jing Yunjiao was about to pick up the gift on the ground, but Li Xiaoyun grabbed her hand directly. "It's fine to have the servants take it. Otherwise, why would we invite them?" The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. She glanced at him and said softly, "Are you sure you're not making me hate you? People who like you won't hate you because you didn't perform well the first time. People who don't like you won't improve their attitude towards you because you're polite. In our house, it's like this for now," Li Xiaoyun said directly. As for whether it would improve in the future, it wasn't that important to him. Jing Yunjiao's eyes flashed. She also knew why Li Xiaoyun was so cold to his parents. When Li Xiaoyun was young, his mother had taken care of him for a period of time. However, his mother had a stingy personality. She often used the child's matters to discuss with her husband. She wanted Old Master Li to pay some money and other things. Old Master Li had a tough temper, so he simply took his grandson to his side. At first, of course, Li Xiaoyun's mother was unwilling. She cried and threw a tantrum, but because of Old Master Li's status, she complied. Old Master Li wasn't a heartless person. Although he took care of the child, he often let the child see his parents. But every time they met, his mother cried and said bad things about Old Master Li in front of him behind his back and asked him to please Grandpa. Sometimes, she even asked him to find out how many assets Old Master Li had. And sometimes, she even asked Li Xiaoyun to ask him to please Grandpa. Sometimes, she even asked him to find out how many assets Old Master Li had, and sometimes she asked him to find out how much his Li's old master, Li Junwei, was very busy when he was young. His son, Li Peixian, also grew up in the army when he was young. However, unlike Old Master Li, he was more cultured and didn't agree with things like fighting and killing. Hence, Old Master Li didn't like his spineless appearance. Li Peixian wasn't bad, but he definitely wasn't smart either. According to Old Master Li's words, he was mediocre and definitely couldn't be placed in an important position. Hence, after so many years, although he was promoted, he was still in an idle position. After considering the personalities of his parents, Jing Yunjiao thought that when they met, he must restrain his temper as much as possible. At this moment, the door inside opened and Jing Yunjiao and Li Peixian were invited in. Chapter 1324. As soon as he entered the house, Jing Yunjiao was shocked by the furnishings in the house. This house was definitely not small for ordinary people. It was a single-family 3-story villa with a garden at the entrance and a small fountain. If it was taken care of well, it would definitely be an extremely comfortable place. However, the furnishings in the house were a little dazzling. In other words, the style was complicated. It was a mix of foreign style and modern elements, but there were also some places that were a little too flamboyant with gold. Of course, it was not ugly. It was just that he was used to old Master Li's taste. Looking at it now, he was more or less surprised. There were many people sitting in the house. At this time, they only looked up at the two of them and continued to sit on the sofa. At this time, a woman stood up and walked in front of Li Xiaoyun. Xiaoyun, you came at the right time. Your 2 aunts and cousin have just arrived. Come and sit. She acted as if she did not see Jing Yunjiao. Li Xiaoyun's mother was called Wang Rushan. Jing Yunjiao could tell that although she was not extremely beautiful when she was young, she was still a pretty girl from a humble family. She had an oval face and willowy eyebrows. She was a classic ancient beauty. Although she was a little older now, she had taken good care of herself. She looked very pleasing to the eye. If she just stood there quietly, she would give people a comfortable feeling. However, once she opened her mouth, one could tell from her anxious expression that she was thinking about something. At this time, Li Xiaoyun did not move. Mother, this is Zhao. Li Xiaoyun stood still and spoke seriously. The way he addressed her was formal and slightly distant. Wang Rushan's heart skipped a beat. She looked a little embarrassed, but she was also a little afraid of her son. Therefore, she immediately squeezed out a smile and quickly reached out to Jing Yunjiao's hand. You are Yunjiao? You are so handsome. It must have been hard on you. Come and sit. Although her words were gentle, Jing Yunjiao could still hear a trace of reluctance. However, there was no need to be calculative. He immediately smiled and said, Thank you, Auntie. After Jing Yunjiao finished speaking, Li Xiaoyun smiled and took Jing Yunjiao's hand from Wang Rushan's. He pulled her directly to the side of the sofa and found a suitable position for Jing Yunjiao. When the others saw this, they also stepped forward to introduce themselves. They exchanged a few pleasantries, which could be considered as a greeting. Other than his parents, Li Xiaoyun only had 2 aunts. His eldest aunt, Li Ying, worked for the government. She was dressed very formally, and her expression was more serious. She rarely smiled or talked. His second aunt, Li Rue, used to marry into a rich family. However, her husband was gone, so she looked more cheerful than the former. She was holding a black cat in her hand and stroking its fur with her slender fingers. She looked noble. Both of them had sons. They were slightly younger than Li Xiaoyun, about 23 or 24 years old. Their appearances were also very outstanding. As for Li Xiaoyun's father, he sat at the head of the table with a calm expression. He wore a pair of glasses and was dressed in a suit. He looked like a successful person. At this moment, Jing Yunjiao felt that although Li Xiaoyun had Li Peixian's blood flowing in his veins, his backbone was similar to old Master Li's. His personality was probably more like the young Qi Yugua. After all, Li Xiaoyun was deeply influenced by Qi Yugua when he was young. It was no wonder that old Master Li did not care much about this group of children. Xiaoyun, we haven't seen you in a long time, right? I didn't expect you to bring a little girlfriend here. Look at this girl. She is so pretty and lively, said the second aunt, Li Rue, with a smile. Chapter 1325. Li Rue seemed to be kind, but she was sizing up Jing Yunjiao from head to toe, as if she was checking her worth. Zhao is my fiancé. The two families will pick a date to get engaged soon, Li Xiaoyun said without leaving a trace. He was obviously refuting Li Rue's words just now. Little girlfriend was not wrong, but from her tone, it sounded as if Jing Yunjiao was a greedy person who had hooked up with Li Xiaoyun. Engagement? Wang Rushan panicked when she heard that. She quickly said, "But didn't you say that you would bring her here for us to see?" "That's right, but now you have indeed seen her. After the necessary procedures are completed, I hope that things will be settled as soon as possible. And I think you should be very satisfied with Zhao. In that case, there is no need to hesitate." Li Xiaoyun spoke politely at this time, but he was more imposing than Li Peixian, who was sitting next to him. When he spoke, everyone could only look at him anxiously, obviously a little afraid. As soon as he finished speaking, several people looked at each other. Wang Rushan quickly looked at her husband, Li Peixian. The middle-aged man adjusted his glasses and coughed dryly. He said, "I think this girl is not old. I heard that she is still a student. Isn't it too rushed to settle it so early?" They all knew how famous Jing Yunjiao was. She was not a star, but everyone knew that. Not only did she have a big business, but she also had Qi Yugua as her backer. Who would dare to provoke such a person? Although marrying such a girl would bring glory to the family, wouldn't they have to serve her? Also, the upper-class families had spread the news that Li Xiaoyun was going to be a son-in-law. Their Li family had a big business. Why would he be a son-in-law of a girl who had no family background? The one who was most jealous was Wang Rushan. She did not have a high status. She was able to marry into the Li family because she was lucky to meet Li Peixian. On the other hand, Li Junwei, her father-in-law, did not have high requirements for his daughter-in-law's family background, so it went so smoothly. However, after so many years, her background had always made her uncomfortable. Most of the people in this circle only paid attention to her because of the Li family's reputation. Otherwise, no one would accompany her when she went shopping. Although her son wasn't close to her, he was still her son. If he married a woman as strong as Jing Yunjiao, what would she do? Moreover, he was suppressed by his daughter-in-law? Wang Rushan looked at her son anxiously, but his expression remained the same. After hearing her husband's words, she just chuckled and said directly, "Zhao will be 20 in a year. Besides, going to school won't affect getting married." "Xiaoyun, Miss Jing's business is busy. She has to go to school and work. I don't think you should put pressure on her." After she stabilizes the things in her hands, you can slowly talk about getting married. Although you are a few years older than her, you are a man. There are many people in their 30s who are getting married. There is no need to rush, right? Second Aunt Li Rue said as she reached out to stroke the cat in her arms. In the past, everyone in the family hoped that Li Xiaoyun would get married. After all, Li Xiaoyun was usually very busy, and the old man was too old to take care of children. In this way, they could have more contact with Li Xiaoyun's wife, improve their relationship, and better understand the old man's thoughts. Therefore, they had introduced many women to Li Xiaoyun in the past. However, Li Xiaoyun was too rude to women in the past. So far, none of them had succeeded. Chapter 1326. These people had never expected that Li Xiaoyun would fall in love with such an illustrious woman. Looking at the girl's appearance, there was no doubt that she was beautiful. However, even when she was smiling, there was still a hint of coldness in her eyes. At a glance, one could tell that she was not an obedient person. Moreover, she had the Su family behind her. The Su family was too scheming. They would definitely give this girl advice. When the time came, how would they be competing with this girl? They would be competing with the entire Su family. "So you're saying that you don't agree with this marriage?" Li Xiaoyun asked with a faint smile. Everyone was stunned. In the end, Wang Rushan said slowly, "It's not that we don't agree, but we want you to take it slow so that you won't regret it." "Regret? I'm more worried that she'll be the one regretting it," Li Xiaoyun said sarcastically. He took a cut fruit from the table and handed it to Jing Yunjiao. He continued, "In terms of family wealth, my wife is only 19 years old, but her family is already wealthy. It's only a matter of time before she becomes the wealthiest. In terms of family heritage, the Jing and Su family are both large families with a 1,000-year-old heritage. Both her ancestors and her own family have saved countless people. With this kind of luck, she will definitely be blessed with good fortune in the future. In terms of family attitude and character, although Elder Su is arrogant, he's still polite to me. The Su family treats their guests well. As for the Li family, Zhao has been married for some time now, but all of you have been criticizing her. She hasn't even had a sip of hot tea yet. She's my wife. I can't even bear to dislike her, but all of you have such big opinions. After Li Xiaoyun finished speaking, his smile was even colder than the cold wind outside. His words silenced the crowd. Li Xiaoyun knew very well that they were just being selfish. It was the same for his parents. When choosing a daughter-in-law, they didn't look at her character or whether she was suitable or not. Instead, they wanted to find someone they could control. They just wanted to get some benefits from their daughter-in-law and find out things they shouldn't know. Xiaoyun, you're being too serious, Li Peixian reprimanded coldly. Father, you want to use your connections to change your position, right? Li Xiaoyun did not answer directly, but changed the topic. When Li Peixian heard this, his heart skipped a beat. Although he had a powerful father, it did not help him much in his work. For so many years, he had been an idle person. He had thought about changing his position many times, but he had not succeeded. This time, there was a position that was empty. He thought that he must seize the opportunity, but this father did not pay attention to him. His son never asked about his work, so it had been a headache for him. Could it be that his son wanted to use the engagement to exchange with him? After all, it was just an engagement. It was not impossible to agree to it. That's right. I've been in this position for many years. I feel that with my ability, Grandpa said that if you want to go to those unsuitable positions, he might be unhappy and ask you to rest at home and retire early. Li Peixian hadn't finished speaking when Li Xiaoyun suddenly spoke, causing his face to turn ashen. It wasn't that he hadn't been to an important position before, but what had he done? He had made a mess of things, listened to the words of petty people, and ruined things. If it wasn't for his father, he probably wouldn't be able to live a stable life now. He was unsatisfied, too greedy, and had high standards but little ability. Although Li Xiaoyun knew that the person in front of him was his father and should be respected, if it involved his marriage or affected the Li family's principles, there was no room for discussion. Chapter 1327. After Li Xiaoyun finished speaking, he stood up and reached out to pull Jing Yunjiao up as well. After patting her clothes, he looked around and said, I came here today mainly to inform you guys, not to listen to your opinions. Whether it's the engagement or marriage in the future, Grandpa will handle it for me. I won't trouble you guys. If you guys are willing, feel free to attend when the time comes. If not, it's fine if you don't show up. A trace of surprise flashed across Jing Yunjiao's face. She never thought that Li Xiaoyun would be so domineering towards his own parents. However, thinking about it carefully, he wasn't like this towards old man Li. So, it wasn't that he wasn't filial, but that he could differentiate clearly. Since Li Xiaoyun didn't want to stay any longer, Jing Yunjiao naturally wouldn't blindly think of having these elders acknowledge her identity. Thus, after giving them a polite smile, she also followed Li Xiaoyun's footsteps. Behind them, the faces of Li Peixian, Li Xiaoyun, and Li Xiaoyun's second aunt were twitching furiously. On the other hand, Li Ying calmly took a sip of tea. Her expression remained indifferent. First sister, second sister, what do you think we should do? If Xiaoyun really marries that woman, what should we do? Asked Wang Rushan with a worried look on her face. Sister-in-law, I think you are too weak. You are Xiaoyun's mother. If you harden your heart, that woman won't even be able to marry into the family. Even if Xiaoyun is angry, what can he do to you? You gave birth to him, so it is only natural for him to listen to you, said Li Rui. Wang Rushan sighed when she heard that. Finally, Li Ying spoke. I think this girl is quite good. Big sister, are you sure? What's so good about such a domineering girl? Li Rui hurriedly denied. Big sister, are you saying that we should agree? But won't that be akin to admitting defeat? Asked Wang Rushan carefully. She was also frightened by these two sisters-in-law. Li Ying was a strong woman who had been strong all her life and did a better job than her husband. Although Li Rui used to be delicate and not very capable, she was now rich and lived a luxurious and carefree life. Except for the lack of a husband, she had no regrets in other aspects. Sister-in-law, I came here today mainly to see what the girl who cured Chiyugwa is like. I'm not here to condemn this child with you. In my opinion, our father's taste must be right. It is our Li family's blessing to marry such a girl. Li changed her posture and sat up straight. The reason why she didn't express her love for Jing Yunjiao was mainly because she didn't know Jing Yunjiao's specific situation and Li Xiaoyun's true attitude. Of course, there was also the matter of children. She wasn't a young person after all, so she couldn't understand the idea of equality. Although it was a pity that the Jing clan didn't have any inheritance, to her, the Li clan was more important. However, if Jing Yunjiao could have a few more children in the future, this matter wouldn't be too big of a problem. The moment Li Ying said that, Wang Rushan's expression became hesitant and conflicted. Sis, I don't agree with your words. You have to marry a virtuous wife. The most important thing for a woman is to support her husband and teach her children. Our Xiaoyun isn't bad either. She just likes to keep a low profile. This Jing Yunjiao, on the other hand, is a head above hers. If this were to spread out in the future, people would only say that we're lucky, but it's obviously Jing Yunjiao who climbed up a higher branch. Li Rue immediately refuted. Why should a woman take good care of her husband and children? Why can't a man take a step back? Rue, you are also a woman. When your husband was alive, you didn't take good care of him and children either, said Li Ying directly. Chapter 1328. Li Rue was no longer young, and her son was already an adult with his own thoughts. On the other hand, she was still an arrogant young lady. She spent her days shopping, playing, making friends, and living a fulfilling life. In the eyes of others, such a life might be considered unfaithful, but for Li Rue, all she wanted was to be happy. That was why Li Ying was using those words to educate her. Big sister, are you rubbing salt on my wound? Li Rue's face turned cold at the mention of her late husband. I'm only telling you that this is Xiaoyun's marriage. You know very well what kind of person he is. You shouldn't interfere too much. Originally, I didn't approve of this marriage, but since Xiaoyun likes it, as his aunt, I will naturally stand on his side, said Li Ying. Her big brother and sister-in-law were both people who didn't have their own opinions. Most of the time, they weren't bad people either. But Li Rue was someone who loved to see the world burn. Very few people could catch Li Rue's eye, and the moment she disliked them, she would say something bad about them. Her big brother and sister-in-law had heard a lot of things like that, so they would definitely have a problem with it. If it was any other time, with eldest brother and sister-in-law's personalities, even if they didn't like Jing Yunjiao, they still wouldn't leave Xiaoyun outside and not open the door. Wasn't this all because of Li Rue's suggestion? Li Rue's face turned unsightly when she heard her big sister's words. She snorted coldly, glanced at them, and stood up. Fine. Since big sister doesn't want me to interfere, I won't interfere. But big brother, sister-in-law, you need to think this through. This Jing Yunjiao is not a kind person. Her grandfather is called Li Wenba, and he died after being pushed off the altar by her. How filial can someone as vicious as her be? Furthermore, all of you had expressed your dissatisfaction with her so directly. How can someone like her not bear a grudge? I'm sure she will definitely whisper something to Xiaoyun when she returns. At that time, as parents, you won't even be able to compare to a stranger. After saying that, Li Rue left with her son and the cat. Li Peixian and Wang Rushan, who were in the room, frowned when they heard this. They did feel a little uncomfortable. Rich families had no familial ties, and they didn't have a good relationship with their sons. If their sons were to marry a docile and amiable woman, they might still have a say in the future. But if their sons married Jing Yunjiao, they might not even be able to see their sons again. At that thought, Wang Rushan's eyes turned red. It's all my fault for not having a good family background. Otherwise, how could I let a little girl suppress me? Dad is really something. How could he allow someone like Jing Yunjiao to enter our family? Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? Rushan, Li Peixian scolded. You think too much. Our father loves his grandson, and his grandson likes him. How could he deliberately target you? Although Li Peixian didn't have much ability, he still respected his father very much. Even if he blamed his wife in his heart, he couldn't let his wife talk nonsense on the surface. Moreover, His sister and the servants were still in the house. It wouldn't be good if word got out. I don't care. I can't tolerate this daughter-in-law. Wang Rushan cried again. Li Peixian hurriedly comforted her. When Liang saw that, she shook her head inwardly. Being born into a small family didn't necessarily mean one was petty. But her sister-in-law was the kind of person who clearly didn't have that kind of temperament, but still insisted on comparing herself to others. Not only was she sentimental, she was also petty. Fortunately, she wasn't very smart. Otherwise, the family wouldn't have a peaceful day. Chapter 1329. Liang didn't stay for long. She knew that the couple wouldn't listen to anything she said, so she didn't bother to say anything. After leaving with her son, she thought for a while and picked out a gift. She asked someone to send it to Old Master Li to make up for the lack of a gift. Before Jing Yunjiao went to meet Li Xiaoyun's parents, Old Master Li had already given her a heads up. Therefore, she was prepared for all kinds of situations, so she wasn't agitated. When she went back and received the gift from Li Ying, she was a little surprised. When they met before, it was Li Ying's second aunt who spoke. Her eldest aunt didn't speak at all. She thought that they all had the same idea. She didn't expect Li Ying to express a different attitude afterward. What kind of person is your eldest aunt? Why didn't she speak up for you and me before? Jing Yunjiao looked at the expensive gift and was a little puzzled. Li Xiaoyun glanced at the gift and then looked at Old Master Li. Then he smiled and said, "What kind of person do you think my eldest aunt is?" Old-fashioned, serious, and traditional. Jing Yunjiao frowned and thought for a while before saying these three words. When the grandfather and grandson heard this, they both smiled. "Good boy, my eldest daughter is quite like your eldest uncle. Both of them are smart. They look old-fashioned and serious, but in fact, they are cunning and good at scheming." Old Master Li's beard curled up and he said, "This old-fashioned and serious look is just a disguise. She values reputation and achievements very much. In addition, because of work, she is very scheming and good at scheming. She sent you these gifts to win you over and also to test you. It's good that you accept them calmly. The next time you meet her, just be indifferent. Don't think that she is sincere to you. She just wants to take this opportunity to know how shrewd you are and figure out your character. Only then can she get benefits from you in the future." Li Junwei was merciless in his evaluation of his daughter. She had to admit that because they were Old Master Li's children, she thought highly of them. At this time, when she heard Old Master Li's explanation, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. "You seem to look down on them?" Jing Yunjiao said softly. "Lass, you don't know. Back then, the war was chaotic and it wasn't easy to marry a wife. I didn't have high expectations, so the lady I married was very ordinary. Not to mention culture, she didn't even have much education. I trained and fought outside all day long and relied on her to educate my children. I had Elder Chi's guidance, so I was able to achieve what I have today. They were different. They didn't see much of the world in the past. Other than the identity I gave them, they didn't have anything. However, this kind of thing was unavoidable. At that time, it was not like now, where they could reduce their workload for their children. Back then, time was blood. The more they missed, the more they would lose. Therefore, there was no time for education. Actually, that kid Peixian was not bad when he was young. He was quite brave and always wanted to follow me to kill enemies. However, later on, a kid in the courtyard accidentally jumped when he was playing with a gun. He saw that scene. Later on, my wife repeatedly warned him about how scary the gun was, causing him to become more and more timid. Saying that he was timid is overestimating him. At that time, the emphasis was on having children. My wife felt that the son was everything, so she treated him like a precious treasure. After a long time, his ears became soft and he listened to women too much. He wasn't bad at heart, but he was just brainless. Old Master Li was already a little disdainful towards the end. Chapter 1330. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but sigh. No wonder Grandpa Li kept Li Xiaoyun under his wing. Otherwise, this man of hers would have turned into a timid and childish playboy. Grandpa Li, it's fortunate that you raised Xiaoyun well, Jing Yunjiao praised. At the mention of Li Xiaoyun, the old man couldn't help but laugh for a while. That was true. His son couldn't be changed, but his grandson was definitely the best in the world. His education in the past was quite effective. Li Xiaoyun glared at her from the side, as if he was complaining. He was the one who was praised, but the old man was the one who was being praised. This made him feel very uncomfortable. He even started to wonder if his wife had taken a fancy to him or the old man. Back then, when he first saw Old Master, he was the only one who was so excited. When Jing Yunjiao saw Li Xiaoyun's resentful gaze, he secretly patted his back, as if he was patting the fur of a puppy. However, Li Xiaoyun enjoyed it very much, and his bad temper dissipated very quickly. With this grandfather-granddaughter pair's advice, Jing Yunjiao accepted the gift and let the person return her thanks. She didn't show too much excitement. However, not 2 days later, this eldest auntie, Li Ying, asked her out for a meeting. Jing Yunjiao calmly went to meet her, but she activated her shield the entire time, trying to defend herself as much as possible. In the end, Li Ying's fawning only turned into simple greetings, and they quickly dispersed. Jing Yunjiao finally understood why Li Ying had the same attitude as everyone else in the beginning. After all, even though there were a lot of rumors about her, Li Ying still didn't know her well enough. That's why she wanted to test her character through the tit-for-tat between her and other people before deciding what to do next. Everyone was full of traps. One had to be careful of being tricked at any time. After the new year, Jing Yunjiao had a lot of dinners. She had a few companies and a lot of connections. In the past, she could hide in the back and not show her face, but now she had to occasionally take care of others' faces. Fortunately, Pak Yuan and the others were becoming more and more capable in the business field. They could easily deal with people and blocked many invitations for her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have enough time to spend 24 hours a day. When the business contacts were more or less settled, Jing Yunjiao would get together with Pak Yuan and some other friends every year. This year, she even invited them to the old Jing residence for a reunion dinner. The Jing family's old residence was exactly the same as the Su family's. After Li Wenba fell from power, this house was also taken over by her and officially became her private residence. After all, she was the heir of the Jing family, and it wasn't appropriate for her to always live in the Su residence. After all, even if she didn't have any objections, the Jings would be worried. She was young and a girl. In the eyes of outsiders, it was easy for others to control and influence her. Although the Su and Jing families were on the same side, there were still times when they had to draw a clear line. There couldn't be any confusion in their businesses. The Jings didn't want the Su family to interfere too deeply in her businesses, in case someone tried to seize power again. In fact, Jing Yunjiao wasn't worried. She wanted to insist, but her grandfather saw things more clearly than she did. Before the Jings could force her to be independent, her grandfather chased her out of the house. Fortunately, although they were two families, their relationship was no different from before. Jing Yunjiao didn't care about those small details. In the Jing residence, the environment wasn't bleak. There were many servants, who were all personally selected by Jing Yunjiao. In order to welcome the guests, the decorations were especially luxurious and warm. There were more than they could handle as they waited for the guests to arrive. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.